Welcome back, everybody, to Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, and I am the Chief Sales Architect and author of Bulletproof Selling. Now, we believe here at this organization that hope is not a sales strategy, and so we are here to increase the performance of salespeople and the results that their leaders get out of their sales team. So this Bulletproof Selling series, this live stream that we do, features really insights from the top mind in sales, speakers, best-selling authors, and of course, those that are actually out there in the field managing salespeople and closing deals, which is the exact position that our guest is in today. So for all of us here, our commitment is that every single episode, you leave with a system that you can use and implement to get those better results, no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. So it's my pleasure today to introduce somebody that I got to meet through one of the engagements I was able to do with the dairy industry. In fact, you wouldn't think that there'd be a lot of salespeople in dairy. I mean, what do farmers have to sell? But there's a lot of different verticals in that market that we're going to be talking about today. And of course, their world has changed as all of our world as salespeople have changed. So Robert Chesler, please welcome to the show, sir, with StoneX. Please give everybody that's listening and watching live a little overview of who you are, who you sell to, and all of the salespeople in your organization, because they may be scratching their heads like dairy salespeople. So fill me in on that. Where do you fit in that puzzle?
Well, thanks for having me, Sean, and thanks for the opportunity to share some of this. It's been an exciting adventure. We had a boutique brokerage firm that we sold to StoneX about 15 years ago. We were about a dozen people, and our group within StoneX organization of 3,000 has grown from that original 12 to about 75. Nice. Back in the day, we were all domestic in the U.S., just in a couple of states. Today, we're in a lot of states. We're in Canada. We're in 3 countries in Europe, and then spread out through Australasia as well.
When you say brokerage firm, Robert, help us understand that, because people are coming like, I'm either inside sales, I'm outside sales, but brokerage, like, tell me about the sales model inside of that. Who do you sell to, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, great question, Sean. So our group is farm to fork. So we work with farmers, we work with physical traders as well as financial traders. We work with the manufacturers, be it private or cooperative, and then the people who put the food on the table, whether it be in a package or it be in a restaurant. Okay. And we gather intelligence, we share intelligence as to what's going on with the industry, supply and demand. We provide price forecasts, and then we help people seize opportunities to meet or exceed budget based on what the futures markets will offer them. We also help our customers engage in physical forward contracts with suppliers. So if I'm a farmer, that might mean forward contracting my price of milk to my milk handler or co-op. Or my grain supplier. And similarly, if I'm a food company, much the same. It might entail plastics, it might entail dairy. Our group is very holistically managed. The moniker our group has taken on is Commodity Edge X, standing for enterprise, dairy, grain, energy, and the extra trimmings being the beef and pork products and the other things that are packaged for the goods that tie it all together. And so we're a very holistic organization. We're 100% customer oriented. We don't have any proprietary exposure. And our number one sales tactic, if it is that, is to be educators. We aim to educate people on the industry with the belief that if we can do so, we will find people that we align with and we create partnerships with through education and training that ultimately leads to business, whether it be on the information side or it be on the execution side.
So I'm thinking to myself, I'm brand new to the world of sales. It sounds like what you're doing is similar to what somebody might be doing on the stock market, but I know that's not entirely accurate. So what differentiates you from like a stock trader? How does your business model fit into that?
Yeah, another really good one. The stock market, I guess everyone wants to make money. I guess all you have to do is buy GameStop.
Right, exactly.
Not a recommendation, John.
Yeah.
What we do is we help people manage risk, and managing risk versus the stock market where people want to typically bring risk and opportunity on. We work with people who already have risk, right? Their business is touching that commodity and they might not want some of that risk. Or the flip side of that is, when the market presents an opportunity far greater than they anticipated in their forecast, we want to help them seize that so that it's not something that they see and then poof, disappears.
Gotcha. Okay, so if we're managing risk, then I'm a farmer. I want to sell 1,000 gallons of milk to a distributor, and the risk that you're helping me mitigate, if I'm accurate, and please correct me here, is that I'm expecting to sell my milk, let's say, at $1 a gallon. But if the market changes, you're the company that helps me kind of hedge my bet. So if the price of milk is 96 cents instead of $1, that's where your services step in and help me kind of buffer that. Please help me get back on track from there.
As usual, you're right on target. If I'm a
Okay.
dairy farmer and I'm worried about the price of milk going down, we can help them ensure that and provide some sort of safety net. If the price is so advantageous that it provides them a great profit opportunity, we can help them lock that price in specifically. And I'll give you a really great example we're probably all familiar with from just the last couple of weeks with the great freeze and weather anomalies we've seen. Energy prices went absolutely bonkers. There's probably no more professional term for it than bonkers. But the equivalent, so people understand, as to what we saw happen to energy prices that facilities use for processing goods, is equivalent to what would be crude oil at about $850 a barrel. Okay. So if you are a processing facility needing gas, natural gas to run your facility and electricity, those types of things, having locked those prices in advance would have protected and provided a big profit opportunity versus what was passed along because of that unexpected spike with that weather anomaly. And those are the types of preventative things that we help. Again, some for farmers, some for processors, manufacturers, and some for the restaurant companies, but they all have risks that are unpredictable.
So I love the business model. Now let's dive into how many salespeople do you manage, or are you the guy out there pounding the pavement every day making deals?
I love to get out there and be with people as much as possible. COVID's changed how we do that. But my preference is to deal with our customers. They're the lifeblood of what we do. They're the joy of my life and our business. On our team, out of our 75 people, probably about 55 to 60 of them are sales-oriented, customer interacting in different types of capacities. And so we've got them all over the world, and they all have different styles, but the common foundational piece is education and being responsive to customer needs. And I really pride ourselves on the fact that we're big enough to bring size, scale, and opportunity tools that can respond to the opportunity and need, but we're small enough to not have a very rigid box and respond to the wants and adaptability that our customers require.
So are you managing those salespeople yourself, or are you one of the folks that's among the 55?
I try to be both. I'm
okay, two hats. I love it.
I'm definitely leading the team, but every chance I get to go visit customers or prospects, I grab with eagerness and excitement.
Beautiful. So there's a lot of sales leaders, obviously, that are listening to this, because that's who we're trying to serve in this audience. So as another sales leader, talk to us a little bit about, in your market. I mean, you have folks that are serving farmers and other distributors and suppliers and customers all over the world. So while they might have been hopping on a lot of airplanes, did you find in 2019 you were managing a force of kind of hybrid salespeople, or were they hopping on a bunch of airplanes and that's how you did business before COVID happened?
Well, Sean, I used to spend 40 to 50% of my time all over the world and country on a lot of planes for multiple reasons, all business related. And I never imagined a scenario where I'd go a whole year without being on a plane. Even in retirement, I'd take a vacation. March 1st will be 1 year since I've been on a plane. And I'll tell you, if the markets teach us anything, I've said this for a very long time, they teach us to be adaptable. And we certainly all needed to be very adaptable over the course of the last year. And from a customer interaction standpoint, servicing existing customers as well as selling, the technology adaptations that we had replaced the plane. We did have some people moving, but very, very little, just like everybody else compared to pre-COVID. But we saw many of our customers much more frequently because of things like this. Because of the Zoom sessions, which has become a verb, Zooming, just like Ubering. And customers who we saw only at a conference or when we took a trip once a quarter or once a year, depending who they were and where they were, we were able to join them once a week or once every other week on a team meeting and see and hear each other at a much more frequent rate. So it helped us a great deal understand our customer needs and be with them as much as possible in the same situation they were with each other via some sort of technology solution.
I love it. So with this change in technology, then, and it doesn't have to just apply, of course, to StoneX and your company. It could be anybody that you've seen across your industry. What were the most successful salespeople doing in 2020 that allowed them to get that success? What were those kind of leading indicators of action? Were they picking up the phone more? Were they scheduling more Zoom meetings? Or were they just figuring out new ways to serve customers that were in crisis mode rather than, hey, we're at the height of a bull market in 2019. What can you do for us? What did you see the successful people in your industry doing to find that?
That's a very big, very complicated question with a lot of different answers. I'm going to try not to be too long-winded on it, Sean.
Okay, take time.
The reality is the first thing that we all have to do is we have to listen. And too often people forget that we have two ears and one mouth because we should listen twice as much as we speak. And I pride my team on really hearing what people are telling them and then crafting solutions with them. And when you're in chaos, which is what the entire food industry was in March, April, May, June of last year, you have to listen. You have to understand their predicament before you can pretend to begin to come up with solutions. And so we did a lot of listening and understanding and research of what our customers and our prospects were going through. And then in response to that, there was the individual sessions, there was the triage of managing existing situations and positions. And then for the reach out, it really shifted towards WebEx solutions and Zoom solutions, whatever you want to call them, to have lots of seminars, different types of education, information, sharing what was going on in the industry, sharing the plight of others so people could see how others that were similar to them in some capacity were managing similar types of issues. We became a very strong sharing networking situation who I think facilitated a camaraderie, not just between our team and our customers, but amongst the community to offer solutions that all people kind of needed to help each other stay above water, as opposed to letting any individual or the industry as a whole sink.
And so did you see those salespeople then, were they reaching out more with questions just to I don't want to use the word check in because it's kind of a bad thing to do in sales. We've learned to just call to check in. Yeah, you're checking in. Great. I got other things in my life I need to do right now than fill you in on what's going on. But were they, what were they doing, right? If I'm new to your industry and I want to look at this new world that I'm living in, and I say, Robert, help me out, help me understand what I need to do to be successful in this new environment. What are your great salespeople doing right now, specifically that we can all try to model, we can try to manage as a new salesperson? What would you tell me to do?
Well, we used to have a swear bucket on our team desk. It was different than the swear bucket my kids have. It was words like you just used, like check in and follow up.
Check in. Yeah.
So I tell people all the time, and I think we believe that when we go to talk to someone, we should have something actionable. There should be a call to action. There should be an action that they can take. There should be information of value that we're bringing them, especially in the midst of a pandemic where everyone's being pulled in 100 different directions and there's supply chain disruptions. As much as people might like you, they don't want to hear from you just to say hi. They want you to bring something that makes a difference. And so the first part is having a good question. And the next part is forging a solution with them or being able to offer something that you've already identified that can make a difference in their situation, knowing the general dynamic of the macro market.
I love it. So showing up with a great question. Let's start there. How do I begin to come up with a great question that opens a conversation? I mean, obviously, I'm calling someone that's in a specific industry, but maybe that's all I know about it ahead of time. I know that they're in dairy, that they manage, 1,000 head of cattle or whatever that might be. That's all I know. So how do I take that information, and maybe I need to know more before I pick up the phone to have a better question, but how do I begin to formulate a great question that hopefully leads into, let's talk about a solution?
In the heat of the pandemic, when the uncertainty was the strongest, the questions were really about how strong is the supply chain? How much disruption is there? And those were the first questions, understanding, are you losing production? Are you losing customers? Is milk being dumped? And if they said, yeah, milk is being dumped, and we don't have that physical supply being delivered or being picked up, the next question is, do you have positions on that are exposed to that? Because if you have a hedge for something that you're touching physically, but you no longer have cash flow tied to that physicality, you don't have a balance. And so that's the first thing with existing customers that we had to ascertain was your intended risk reduction program actually heightened risk because of a disruption on the physical side?
Did you find a lot of customers didn't have a risk reduction program?
Sorry, go ahead.
Did you find some of your well, I guess they wouldn't be customers, but did you find some folks, weren't actually, hedging their bet. Like you called some people just because they were on your prospect list, but they did not have anything that they could, like you asked, do you have a hedge? No, I've never done business with your company. We're dumping thousands of gallons of milk and we're losing that money. It's going down the drain. Did you find that to be the case at all? Or were you only touching people who had purchased, a suite of products or services like yours in the past?
No, you're spot on. We had all of the answers above, and we had some very astute individuals and organizations who tried to emulate the Southwest model. Southwest famously in the early 2000s had locked in their fuel exposure for, I forget how many years, the better part of a decade or so. And therefore famously had low prices for a long time. Well, when energy prices broke, crude went negative, as most people probably remember. We had a lot of people calling saying, how long can I lock in my energy needs, whether it's diesel for trucking or it's nat gas for the facility? There was a discount in the market, and they were being very proactive, saying in this triage situation, we're not going to let the opportunity go to waste. And they were trying to do 3 to 5 year deals. On the other side, where today they might have lost physical production or sales, they were actually scurrying for how do I maybe get out of positions that I no longer need because there's disruptions to the supply chain that probably won't last long, but are probably going to be here for the next 30, 60, or 90 days.
So you are a safety net and in case of emergency, break glass kind of a company then, is what it sounds like.
I like that. I'm going to have to use that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's exactly that's perfect. It's perfect. So as a salesperson then, if we move a little bit outside of your industry, to think about how could we take what's working in your industry and apply it to the rest of us in the world, how do I position myself as a value added resource in the life of a prospect or a client that is just freaking out right now? Because maybe they're still losing money. Maybe they're waiting for that Paycheck Protection Program loan to come through. What advice would you have for salespeople to either do the research or formulate a question or approach it with the right mindset so that when I pick up the phone and call, it's not calling to check in. It's calling to say, a little bit about where you're at. Let's talk about that. And then if I can help, I'd love to do it in the suite of products and services that I can offer. But how do I begin to even think about having that conversation when, like your folks had to do all of 2020, farmers are going out of business, right? Their families are not going to be able to afford basic necessities anymore because they're just, they're almost going under or they're gone under. How do you approach that as a salesperson in a crisis situation?
Well, Sean, in those types of question scenarios, I often default to the wisest person I've come across in my life, and that was my grandmother. My grandmother always said, many of her sayings, none have been disproven as of yet. There's only one I'm trying to disprove. I'll save that for later. But she always said the best things come out of the worst situations. You just can't see them when you're going through them. And our first job in that situation that you outlined is to put things in a proper perspective. When we focused on the minutia, we focused on the problems of today, we can often forget to look outside the forest or down the road, whatever expression you want to use, to look at the grandiose opportunities that may lay ahead of us. And we certainly have to solve the triage, just like an emergency room that is today, but we need to identify the opportunities that we can grab today for the future. And that's the balance of figuring out what is the problem with your supply chain disruption today that's probably not going to last very long, and how do we seize these gyrations in market prices to lock something in that's very attractive for you. We're often thought of as risk managers, and I love that. That's true. We are here to manage risk and reduce risk. The flip side is we're also here to seize and maximize profitability when markets offer that opportunity. And that's the most fun part. The most fun part is when we can help people, our customers, when we can help them actually identify something that lets them know that they're going to have better cash flow than expected, because you can beat the market in 2 ways, Sean. And I love this. This is a big favorite of mine. Most people think about beating the market or beating their competition on their price, their profit margin today. The second way to beat it is simply by being cash positive and cash strong at times where the industry as a whole is not. And by doing that and being profitable while your neighbors, literal or figurative, are struggling, it enables you synergistic opportunities and investment opportunities that allow you over the long term to profit and take leaps ahead versus the competition. And that's an area our customers have always exceeded at.
I love it. So if you were to look at we talked about all the things that your folks were doing well in a pandemic. I mean, you're ideally positioned in a time of crisis because you are that in case of glass, or in case of emergency, break glass kind of service. What do you see folks in your industry, look at the commodities and hedging bets and pricing, so just definitely in dairy, but you can feel free to go outside if you like. What is their biggest area of opportunity moving forward into 2021? What's the thing that they could most improve with in order to be successful?
Ooh, talk about a heavy question, Sean. You know
Yeah, I know. It's Barbara Walters here, man. We're asking heavy stuff.
The biggest threat, let's start with that because opportunities can come from that. The biggest threat is the accelerated volatility that we have. And you see it in the stock market, you see it in the commodity markets. There's a plethora of articles from analysts all over the place talking about this new commodity super cycle. We have grains at over 6-year highs. We have crude oil that was negative 6 months ago, now over $60. People talking about it going to $100 again. We have we have businesses like the cruise industry that's not operational, but yet their stocks are starting to rival multi-year highs. So we have this anticipation coming, but we have volatility with it and uncertainty because of the reopening of the economy. And when I think about foods, they're right at the center of that. So restaurants that are fine dining or casual dining and dependent upon people coming in need to order enough for the reopening dates that they now are coming, but there's a reluctance to overbook and oversupply because they don't know if there will be a step back in another shutdown.
Right.
And so managing those needs, managing those expectations with the profitable opportunities that exist in the market is probably the biggest opportunity. It means being a little bit more nimble than usual. It means being a bit more adaptable than the standard, but seizing those things quickly. And if organizations have the policies in place to empower their staff to make decisions when the market's there, to pre-plan so that they enact plans as opposed to reacting to that unexpected volatility, that gives them the greatest opportunity to satisfy their customers and their shareholders alike.
And so how do we make sure that our salespeople are taking advantage of that? Whether that's an education piece, whether it's, providing them, here's a map for planning for the reopening of your restaurant. How are the salespeople in your industry ideally positioned? Or excuse me, I'm going to ask this question a different way because we're trying to figure out, if there's a gap in the industry for how the salespeople that you manage go about their jobs in this changing world that we're in. At a strategic level, as leaders, we can see it, but we're not on the phone, 50 dials a day or sending 80 emails or meeting, 12 different back-to-back Zoom appointments. So as a salesperson in your industry, what are the things that I can begin doing to make sure that I'm positioned to provide my clients and my prospects with what you just talked about?
Well, our industry has perhaps a slight advantage over some others. Our industry can only do one of three things. The market can go up, down, or stay unchanged, and it doesn't stay unchanged very often. So, the first thing is to have some general understandings of what we can present to people given different market scenarios. If the market goes up or it goes up this much, this is what the impact would look like to you. And this is a suggested general recourse. If it goes down, the flip side to that as well. And then when they want to look at it, when they have time to look at it, then we take from that macro general, if the market does this, and we apply their specific metrics to it and create a plan. That we can then enact and dust off whenever the market does exactly what was expected or dreaded.
I love that. So let's talk about building this into a system then that people can use across industries. I think that's going to be really valuable because we don't know. We're all very hopeful the market's going to come back and rebound and be better than it ever was, but there's also the possibility that it doesn't, that it remains in stasis or that it even goes down. So let's talk about building a system so that we can begin to plan for having resources available for our clients, for our prospects, no matter what the market does. So when we talk about systems here at Bulletproof Selling, we talk about trimming hope from our sales strategy. So what a lot of salespeople do, thankfully not on your team, is they wait for the market to do something and then they pick up the phone and try to wing it from there. Well, that's not the best strategy, obviously. I want to have resources. I want to have a campaign together. I want to have, articles, videos, white papers, things that my prospects and clients can use today. But without knowing what tomorrow's going to look like, what can I begin doing today to make that happen? So let's talk about this system. If we use the acronym TRIM, so trimming hope away, the T in TRIM is the trigger. And so trigger being, in this industry, for instance, in particular, if the market goes up, that's my trigger to enact this campaign, because the market is going up for my prospects. If it remains in stasis or there's a lot of volatility, a lot of micro adjustments over the course of a period of time, maybe that's the trigger to launch that volatility campaign. or if it just tanks, which I know none of us want to see, but it happened in 2008, it happened in 2001, it might happen again. If it tanks, what's the campaign that I need to put in place so that I can be of service to my clients and prospects if the market takes an incredible downswing? So that could be a great trigger. But this is the part I'd love you to get your insight on to make it repeatable. That's the R in trim. How do I make sure that what I'm reaching out to with my prospects is outside of my head? And that might look like a CRM, it might look like a checklist, it might look like a folder on my computer. How would you advise your salespeople make sure that when we get prepared for what the market's going to do in the next quarter, that it is repeatable for all of us? So I don't have to think with every new prospect, what's the article I have to send today, given the fact what's going on? How would you advise your folks to make this outreach system repeatable?
Yeah, so the system is really a function of pleasure and pain. Let's stick with the farmers that you were talking about earlier. When they're doing really well and very profitable, they might choose to go buy something new from an equipment standpoint, a new truck,
Sure.
a new tractor, something like that. They're clearly not very likely to do that when they're struggling financially. So that pleasure response is to spend pre-tax on something that's good for their business and also brings them some pleasure. For us, on the T side of things, people often think of us when they're having the pain, but then it's too late to fully help them. So part of our job, a big part of our job that we have to roll into the R, the repeatable, is reminding people that when you're in that pleasure point, it unfortunately is probably not going to last forever. Commodities are very cyclical. And that's when we need to be as proactive as possible in taking an action to secure that for whatever duration the market will allow us. And then it's really all about technology. I mean, every company, certainly ours, is increasingly a technology company. And we have to use technology to be repeatable, to set alerts, to set reminders. We have a very personalized, very customized approach. And we have to KYC. We have to know your customer. We have to know each customer and their individual and specific needs, which means we have to be able to know when to call them based on what they told us when an opportunity exists. And the only way to do that is a CRM system that flags something, that has notes, that allows us to connect oftentimes to a quote system or something that identifies market price opportunities. We have some technology systems that we supply to customers, predominantly called No Risk, KNOW, to be able to know and identify a risk. They allow our customers to set those flags or alerts with us or independently on themselves, and it gives them a pleasant dinging sound when an opportunity they identified as desirable has arisen. And it gives them an opposing sound when something frightening is occurring.
But in either case, your company is the solution, whether it's going up or down. So that's great. I love that. I love it. Yeah, so we've got the trigger, we've got it repeatable, and I love the way that you did that, to be able to say, to have even our customers mapped out for, I expect this to happen in the market, and these are the segment of customers that's likely going to affect. So let's talk about the I in trim, which is making this thing improvable. So how do I, through the course of this campaign, maybe it's a month-long campaign or a quarter-long campaign or whatever that cycle in the market I think is going to last, where I can ideally position myself as a solution to this segment of prospects. How do I make sure that I'm improving along the way? Am I paying attention to callbacks, to meetings driven, to actual business written? How would you advise your folks to keep track of whether this thing is working or not?
How do you keep track of what's working? I mean, in today's world, we're all dependent on CRM systems to track results and give us data. Data-driven decisions are the most powerful. I'm very much old school and a people person. I loved the seminars that were 10, 12, 15 people, where you actually had time in your half-day seminar to interact with each person. Whereas I think the standard or norm is for people to get excited about numbers. There's 200, 500, 1,000 people at my event or conference. But how many real relationships can you forge in that scenario? But the reality is, especially in this WebEx environment, you have more of those with more numbers, and you need to put them into some sort of system so you can track who's actually engaged, who's interested, what are they clicking on, what information are they looking at, who on your team is actually, to use a curse word, following up with them.
Right.
But if you're using data the right way and in a scalable fashion, you're not just following up with them just to check in, another naughty word. You're actually reaching out to them about something is of interest because they have pinged you on it. They have clicked on something they can supply based on it. And now you can give them something deeper, dive into it, information that they need, and probably, hopefully, potentially something that's actionable and difference making to them. And then we have to be able to track that and make sure that our sales staff, our broker staff are doing a good job at answering those calls.
And that's the next piece of this, and the final piece of the TRIM acronym is making sure that this is measurable. So we've got the trigger, and we're going to set those up. We've never even thought about this on the show before, so I'm glad you brought it forward to set campaigns up to kind of have in reserve based upon what happens in the market. So that's a great trigger. If the market changes, it does X, pick up X campaign and get it into action on those segmented prospects. We've got making it repeatable outside of our heads, improvable, making sure that we are tracking along the way who's interacting with what, and not just letting it sit out there and hope something happens. But the measurable piece that you brought up just now, by making sure that our managers are measuring the actual results of this thing. How would you go about advising salespeople to measure the results of a campaign that is largely dependent on what's going on in the market? Where I love to own results in my own sales company, but if I'm launching a campaign for a bull market, I need to track what's going on with my prospects and responding to it and engaging in my services. Bear market would be a little different. So how would you advise folks really begin to measure the effect of this to know, should I be using it next year?
I don't know if it's unique to our industry. I'm sure it has some applicability to others, but for us, we have a large number of people that want information. Mm-hmm. And we have a percentage of those who actually turn that into something actionable, a transaction or a subscription sort. And so it's a fine line for us of supplying archived information, delayed information, or free trials, and then converting that to something where we're actually engaged with them and helping them in an actionable way of making a difference. And that's what we need the data to track, right? That's where we have to understand who's looking at information and who's using information, because they're two different things. Mm-hmm. And for us, and I think for other industries, it becomes a question of what is our percentage between people that are subscribing to trials? What is the percentage of those people that are signing up to fresh current information? And then what is the percentage of those people that turn it into an actionable difference-making position with us? And looking at what those domino effects are and what the engagement of our team is in that process and who has what rates of success. And then we do surveys with our customers on an annual or sometimes more frequent basis to get their opinions. Are we helping? Is the information good? Are you taking enough actions? Are you satisfied with all those sorts of things? And we put those all into some sort of data tracking system so that we can compare what we see within the CRM system and other technology tools that we have versus what our customers and our prospects are telling us directly.
I love that. So making it measurable by actually tracking who's taking action on the information, which is a beautiful way to even begin to gauge prospect engagement, right? If they're taking action on what I'm telling them, they're taking my advice, I'm being seen as a trusted resource, that's a massive wide open door to being able to serve them in the future, as opposed to just knocking on the door and hoping someone answers. So this is a great system, but thank you so much for helping us build that. As we get ready to hop off here, because we try to keep these to a half hour, because I know you've got to manage a sales team, so I don't want to keep you on too long. How can people find out more about you, about StoneX, about the great things that you all are doing, whether they're in the dairy market or not? That's, they want more information about you. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can, for macro information on the company or any drill downs that you want to click on, go to stonex.com. STONEX.com. And anyone can always feel free to reach out to me personally. My email is robert.chesler, CHESLER, @stonex.com. Or just call or text my cell phone, 847-421-9606. We're very open. We're very accessible. And we're here to help answer questions and get information to people on whatever they need. These are challenging times. And we strive to make them as less challenging and advantageous as possible.
A company that truly is a break glass in case of emergency kind of service. That's needed every period, definitely during the crises that we've all gone through in 2020 and coming into 2021. So thank you so much for sharing the wisdom, the insight across what's been going on in your company for so long and in your industry. For those of us that have just joined us, make sure that you are following us here at Bulletproof Selling on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube for those live streams. And of course, check out the podcast, which these live streams turn into. So if you miss a live stream, you can definitely check it out on the podcast. Those are available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere you can find podcasts. So for more sales systems, for more sales results to help your team replace hope with certainty, check out the resources that we are constantly updating over at www.bulletproof-selling.com. Sean Rhodes here with Mr. Robert Chesler. It's been a pleasure serving all of the salespeople out there. Rob, let's go out there and make selling bulletproof.
Let's do it. Thank you, Sean. Really appreciate everything.